Growing up, my family and I always rented the same beach house every summer. It was old and creaky, but we loved it. I was the only child, so I always had to find ways to entertain myself. The house had a lot of hideaways and little rooms where I would pretend to play hide and seek with people. I know it sounds crazy, but if I didn't make up things, then I would have had a boring childhood. For this year, it was just like any other year. We had clothes and furniture there, so we never needed to pack anything. I instantly began playing around the house as soon as we made it through the door. We got there around 9 p.m., so I played all night. While playing, a trapdoor in the basement that had always been locked caught my attention. I was always set on opening that door to explore whatever was inside. My curiosity got the better of me. I asked my dad about it, but he just shrugged it off, saying it was probably just an old storage space, which he always said every single year. I gave up and went to bed. The next afternoon, I decided to investigate. I found a way to pry it open, and the creaking door revealed a dark, musty staircase leading down. I grabbed a flashlight and carefully descended. The air was damp, and the smell of mildew made it almost unbearable to continue. At the bottom, I found a small room with a single bed in it, with a big box next to it. There was also a chair that had straps on it, which I now know was a restraint chair. I looked in the box and found photos of people being tied in the chair or sleeping in the bed. As a child, I didn't know how bad this was until I took the photos to my parents. They called the owner of the house and the police as well. The owner claimed that he didn't know what that room was and that it had been locked ever since he bought the property. The cops said they would have an investigator come check it out the following day, since it was getting dark soon. Throughout the night, I couldn't help but go back to see what else was in the box, and because I was a curious kid, I wanted to go see why the police would have to be called for just a room with a chair and a bed. When I went back down to the room, I noticed the box had been moved, and the chair that was on one side of the room was now on the other side. I easily concluded that my parents must have moved some things around for the police, which was not the case, but being 8 at the time, that's all I could come up with. That was until I noticed behind the bed frame was a small door that looked like the only way to go through was by crawling. I didn't notice it before because the bed had now been pushed up and the door was creaked open. Then the scariest moment of my entire life happened to me. I got down on my knees to fully open the door and used my flashing to look at what was inside. That's when I saw another room that had a dentist looking set up with someone sitting in the chair humming. I quickly noticed they were trying to scream for help, but their lips had stitches in them to sew them shut. I screamed at what I saw, and then a man grabbed my flashlight and kneeled to crawl to me. I ran straight to my parents and told them a man was in the basement. They didn't have enough time to stop and ask me what was wrong because I ran outside of the house. They ran after me, and that's when I was able to explain everything to them. My dad went back inside to grab his phone and call the police again. When they showed, I told them and had to walk them through the basement and crawl space. They were able to get the woman who was sitting in the chair and rescue her from him. By the time they got there, though, the man was long gone. I couldn't even remember what he looked like to tell them. All I could remember was a face with a surgical mask that grabbed my flashlight and tried to get me. We never went back to that house, and some people in the town suspect the owner knew what was going on, but he never got arrested for any crime since there was no evidence tied to him. I got traumatized by that night and never went to explore anywhere that I didn't need to ever again. This happened to me last fall while driving home late at night after visiting friends. I took a back road to save time, which I knew could be a bit eerie, but thought nothing of it at the time. The road was narrow and winding, surrounded by thick trees. As I drove, I noticed someone standing by the roadside across from a gas station. It was a woman who was barefoot, wearing a regular black tank top with jeans. I slowed down, considering whether to help. She raised her hand, and I stopped the car. I asked if she was okay, and if she needed a ride anywhere, or for me to call an ambulance. I looked down at her feet, and it looked like she had been barefoot for a while, with how bad they were. When I asked her, she just stared at me, her eyes wide and empty. It was awkward, but I asked again. I told her from woman to woman I would help her and make sure she is safe. I stepped out of my car and approached her, slowly reassuring her that I was just there to help. As I got closer, I realized she looked dirty and worn and her hair tangled. She didn't respond verbally and just continued to stare. I felt like I had to help her, but just as I was about to offer her the shoes on my feet, I heard a voice behind me. It was a man, appearing out of nowhere, looking frantic. He shouted at me to get back in my car. I glanced at the woman, who now had a twisted smile on her face. The man ran toward me, shouting that she had a weapon. Before I could process what he meant, the woman lunged at me. She knocked me against my car door and pulled a pocket knife out while trying to reach for my keys on the side of my jacket. The man ran closer, telling the woman to move. Before he could get any closer, she slashed my throat, took my keys, and got inside my car. I fell onto the ground and the man called 911. The operator told him to hold onto my throat, and thankfully that's what kept me alive. I spent a couple of nights in the hospital, but the police were able to catch her that same night at a diner a few miles down. I was able to keep my car and my life, but not entirely. Sadly, ever since then, I've had this sensational fear of stepping outside my house into the public again. I quit my job and lost most of my friends because of it, but hopefully someday I will be able to see the world the same as I used to. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to experience something truly paranormal, but this incident still gives me chills. Every person I tell this story to doesn't believe me or think they were real people, but ghosts are real. A few years ago, I moved into a little house on the outskirts of town. It was a bit old-fashioned, but I loved it. One night, watching TV in the living room around 10 p.m., I noticed a strange movement out of the corner of my eye. I glanced toward the window that was big enough to see the whole front yard and the sidewalk, and saw a man standing outside, staring directly at me. He looked disheveled, his clothes tattered, and his expression was vacant. I tried to ignore him, hoping he'd leave. My dog barked and took my attention away towards my back door. For context, my back door was a glass door where you could see my backyard from. So when I looked through my back door to see why my dog was barking in that direction, is when I noticed the same man that was standing on the sidewalk looking at me from my front yard was now looking at me from my backyard. I instantly ran back to my front window, and the man was still there, only close against my window, with his hand on it. I shouted that I was calling the police, but he didn't even flinch. He began knocking on my window with an unnerving wide smile going ear to ear. It was an inhumane smile. I looked back at my back door from the same sound to see the same man doing the same thing. It's like they mirrored each other. My dog was growling and barking hysterically while I stood in the middle of my living room, looking back and forth to each door. My body was in shock, and it felt like I couldn't move. I thought it couldn't get any worse until they both started wailing my name. It was way louder than a human could talk, and I was hoping someone could hear it and help me. My dog backed away and ran into my bathroom, and I did the same. I locked the door and leaned against it. It all went silent for a moment. Then my heart dropped when I heard my alarm say that both my front and back doors opened. I realized at that moment that I should have called the police, and now I couldn't, because my phone was on my kitchen counter. I heard the footsteps get closer to the bathroom door, and then stopped and was silent for about 3 seconds before the banging started. My dog, who went from barking and in defense mode, was now whimpering and in the corner. The knob was turning in a forcefully fast way. I thought it was going to break off. I screamed at them to leave me alone over and over again. Then suddenly it stopped. I sat in the bathroom for a very long time, debating on if I should go out again. I didn't hear any of my doors open again, and my alarm didn't say it either. That's when I gathered up the courage to run, grab my phone, and then went back into the bathroom to call for officers. When they arrived, I showed them my alarm notification saying that the doors opened but never reopened again for them to have left. They searched the house, but they didn't have much to search since it was only a one-bedroom house with 2 closets and the bathroom I was hiding in. They found no one and suggested that my alarm could be broken and to get it fixed. They also got my description of the 2 men and said it could have been twins playing a prank on me. I was close to my landlord, so she came over to sleep with me for the next few nights afterward. They never found the men, and nothing has happened since then, but I truly believe I encountered ghosts that day.